All right, welcome. Today we're going to jump into a concept that is absolutely fundamental for cloud security, the big difference between stateful and stateless firewalls. And we're not just going to read definitions, we're going to figure it out by solving a pretty intense real-world problem you might actually face in AWS. So imagine this. You're on call, you get that dreaded alert. There is a single malicious IP address just hammering your systems. And it's not just one server. 500 of your servers are totally exposed. The clock is ticking. You have to block this IP, and you have to do it now, across everything. So what do? What's your first move? And look, this isn't just some textbook problem. We're calling this the 500 server problem. It's a classic race against time scenario, and the tool you choose to use here is going to be the difference between solving this in minutes or having a very, very bad day.
Now, your first instinct, right? You're probably thinking, let's go to the most common firewall in AWS, the one that sits right on each individual server. Makes sense. Let's see how that would actually play out.
So that tool is the security group. You can think of it like a personal bodyguard for each of your virtual servers, your EC2 instances. It's really powerful, for sure, but its focus is super specific. It only cares about that one single instance it's attached to. Okay, so right off the bat, we hit a couple of huge problems with this plan. First, can you imagine trying to update 500 different security groups one by one? It would be incredibly slow, and you're just asking for mistakes. But the real killer here, the absolute deal breaker, is that security groups are built on an allow-only model. You literally can't create a rule that says deny this specific IP. You can only say what's allowed in. That alone makes it the wrong tool for this specific job.
So if the bodyguard at the front door of each server can't help us, we need to zoom out a bit. We need to go to the security guard who's in charge of the entire neighborhood, or in AWS land, the entire subnet. And that, my friends, is the Network Access Control List, or as everyone calls it, the NACL. Now this is the game changer for our problem. See, it doesn't care about individual instances, it works at the subnet level. And that means one single rule can protect every single one of those 500 servers as long as they're in that same subnet. And the fix? Oh, it's so beautifully simple. You just go to the NACL for that subnet, add a new inbound rule, and you give it a low number, something like 99. With NACLs, the lower the number, the higher the priority. Then you just plug in that malicious IP address and set the action to deny. And boom, just like that, it's done. One rule, a few clicks, and all 500 of the servers are immediately protected. That bad IP is completely blocked before it can even sniff your instances. That is the power of using the right tool for the right job. Okay, so we saw what worked. The NACL saved the day. But now let's get into the why. What is it deep down that makes a security group and a NACL behave so differently? Well, the secret sauce is whether they are stateful or stateless. At the highest level, it all comes down to memory. A stateful firewall, like our security group, is kind of intelligent. It actually remembers the conversations, the connections that are passing through it. A stateless firewall, like our NACL, is memoryless. It has no idea what happened a millisecond ago. It treats every single packet of data like a complete stranger. So let's talk stateful. Think of a security group like a really smart security guard at an office building. When you come in, they check your badge. That's the inbound allow rule. Once you're in, the guard remembers you. So when you leave later, you don't have to show your badge again. The guard knows you belong there and just lets you out. It automatically allows that return traffic. Now, a stateless NACL? That's totally different. It's more like a border crossing with two separate guards. The guard at the entry gate checks your passport to let you in, but when you go to leave, the guard at the exit gate has no idea who you are. They don't care that the other guard let you in. They're going to check your passport all over again, based on their own separate set of rules. The inbound and outbound rules are checked independently for every single packet. Okay, but wait a second. This brings up a super important question, right? If that stateless NACL has no memory of the original request, how in the world does it know to let the server's response back out to the user? This is where stateless firewalls can get a little bit tricky. This is what's known as the ephemeral port challenge. See, when your computer connects to a web server, it doesn't just use one port. It picks a random, high-numbered port to receive the reply on. Now, this return port, it could be one of thousands of different numbers, and it changes depending on if you're on Windows or Linux or something else. Trying to write a specific outbound NACL rule for every possible return port would be a complete nightmare. And that
Right there is exactly why most of the time you'll see the outbound rules on a NACL set to just allow all traffic.
All right, that was a lot to take in, I know. So let's boil it all down into a really clear, simple guide you can use to decide when to use each of these awesome tools. So here it is, your go-to guide, the cheat sheet for picking the right tool. Security groups, they're stateful, they live at the instance level, and they only do allow rules. Perfect for detailed, fine-grained access, like only let this server talk to the database. Network ACLs, they're stateless, live at the subnet level, can do both allow and deny, and they care about the rule order. They're ideal for broad stroke filtering, like, blocking a malicious IP from your entire network. And hey, don't just take my word for it. As one security pro put it, knowing this difference is so critical that it's often one of the very first questions they'll ask in a network security job interview. Getting this concept down is absolutely a must if you're serious about working in the cloud. And this might be the single most important thing to remember from all of this. Security groups and network ACLs are not fighting for the same job. They aren't competitors. They are layers. They're two different tools in your toolkit, designed to be used together for a deep, layered defense. So I want to leave you with a question, something to chew on. Now that you know the NACL is your broad, subnet-level gatekeeper, and the security group is your up-close, server-level bodyguard, how would you configure them together to create a security setup that's even tougher and more resilient?